slide is fairly fresh at the moment. We'll start with our science, won't we? Yes, always start with the science first, and I'll tell you why. Because everyone in this room, I can tell by the glazed look in your face, at some stage you're in a high school or in a primary school. And whether you think you got away from that, you didn't. I'm a teacher, I've been a principal, I know how the system works. The system is very simply made to do one thing, to dumb you down and stop you from questioning. And what they tend to do in school is we test these kids every year now. We are now making children memorise what we want them to memorise. And the sad part of the story is they've been lied to. Now, first up, what we're going to do to begin with, we want to go through the new science that's in relation to where did humanity begin. Now, what I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, without any doubt whatsoever, is the scientists are now agreed on one thing. Now, you're not going to read this in mainstream. All of the academics have agreed they now have no idea how we eventuated. Now, I'm going to give you some examples that right now they've just come up. What I call it is the white flag. And what's basically happened, ladies and gentlemen, is the scientists have finally realised this story about humanity's evolution is far too complicated for us really to get our head around. But what they are now saying, and I've got paper after paper now, they're coming out all the time saying, we will soon be able to work out what humanity's evolution is. Soon. You've been told that sometime in the distant past, between 60 to 50,000 years ago, some Africans left Africa, made their way through the whole of Asia, and then came to Australia, and that begins the original story. That is so wrong. I can tell you now, the youngest race on this planet, it's nearly agreed now, isn't it, Evan? It's the Africans. The Africans are the youngest. They are babes in the wood compared to the original people. Now, how do we know this? It's an opinion, but it's based on fact. And let's start with the first one. Oh, you did. Yeah, what happens next? Oh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time we've done this year. We're going to do quite a few experiments, so thank you for being our guinea pigs. If we stuff up today, it's okay. We'll do it with you first and we'll fix it up later. Right, this came out of a magazine I'm sure you might be familiar with. Duncan Rhodes sent it to us. It's from Nexus. And he deliberately put this in for us, which we did appreciate. Now, if I asked you to read that right now, my eyes couldn't see it from here, and I'm sure yours wouldn't either. So what we'll do is we'll cover it. We'll give you a couple of ideas what's there. It was a conference that was held this year by a guy called Professor Paul Stringer. And he started by telling everyone, I have bad news. We have bad news here and we don't know what to do with it. The bad news was this. Their story about 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens originated in Africa, is wrong. That they know. Now let me explain how they've come to that opinion. Now, I'm one of the oldest in this room, so I'll go back to the old time, the dream time way back. When I was a kid in school, I was told there was a thing called Homo erectus. You probably have heard this story too. Walked around, we always drew him as being really hairy and bent over because that makes us feel more comfortable because everything behind us is stupid. Yeah, just trundling along, couldn't speak. And by the way, he doesn't have very good vocal cords, so they probably got that part right. But we knew very little about him. By the way, do you realise all the Homo erectus skeletons, if I laid them out, would fill these two tables here, and we haven't got a foot yet? So don't believe there's a lot of this around. There isn't much. Anyway, the story was Homo erectus, somewhere along, we've got the pictures with NASA, we're bent down like that, and one day Homo erectus turns into Homo sapien. And when I was there, we mentioned about this strange offsuit called Neanderthal, and my science teacher said, just ignore them, they just wander off in the corner. We won't worry about that. That's what we were told when we were kids, and maybe some of you guys were told that too. But it changed. It changed. Do you realise at the moment now that the count is now 15? 100,000 years ago, there were 15 different hominids walking around this countryside, around the world. Homo sapien were one of them. One of 15 or 16, and probably in China, they'll find another one tomorrow, won't they? It could be Homo indigna, Red Deer Caveman, Denisovan. They're all over the place and they keep growing. This whole story about humanity keeps growing and spreading in directions. Now, what they say now is this. Neanderthal, Denisovan, and all the others are the deviant hominids, you know, the lesser ones. And we, sapien, wise men, are the better ones. But we both came from a mummy, the same one. But here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Stringer said it's all wrong because they found what we call a Neanderthal, maybe even a primitive form of Neanderthal that was 400,000 years old. Now, every scientist said, well, that's a problem because if that Neanderthal is 400,000 years old, the split hasn't taken place yet. It must be further back. And what this guy said, Stringer said was, and he's the head of the London Museum, that the whole thing is wrong. He said Homo sapiens were wandering around the countryside between 100 to 400,000 years earlier than we thought. Now that is the science. And the best part is, he didn't even know it's come up since in the last 4 weeks. They've now found in Spain a cross between Denisovan and Neanderthal that's 450,000 years old, which means they've been breeding together for a while. And they've now put the date back, not our date, they've put it back to 750,000 years, when they think the split between all the other hominids and Homo sapien took place. Now what Stringer said is, he said, we're going to have to start a new debate because everything we said before is wrong. So when I say the white flag has been raised, it has been raised. Mainstream are now saying, and that was the 5th conference of archaeology in Europe. It's the biggest one they hold each year. And he was the main speaker. And he started by announcing, I have bad news. Why is that bad news? Because it doesn't fit into their story, so therefore it must be bad. Well, it gets worse, ladies and gentlemen. So what we now have, before we start this equation, I want to put that up first. When we talk about humanity, let's now start with a clean sheet. Because the story is, according to the academics, 750,000 years ago, we don't know who, we don't know where, until we find another hominid that'll be older, and we'll push it back further. That's the science. So that's number 1 on my list here, because we've got 12. After our 12 bits of science, then we get into some more interesting stuff. So off goes the white flag, they've waved it. Right, what have we done in Australia? No way, we're not waving any white flag here, are we, Evan? Not while the academics have got a show here. They're not going to wave any flag. They don't want to listen to this sort of stuff. This is rubbish for them. They know it's happened. And I'm going to talk about a place called Point Ritchie. And it was found by, who was it, Evan? Not paying attention, was he? Jim Bowler. No, too late. No, sorry, you had your chance. It was gone. We can't have these people waiting around all day. They've got to do 4 hours of this. No, you had to get that straight away. Now, Jim Bowler is the great defender of the out-of-Africa theory. If you find a site that's over 50,000 years, you say, no, it's not, it's 40, because it doesn't fit into out-of-Africa. Well, lo and behold, it was Bowler who found this site here. And they did really good science. Did it 3 times. And he got a date at Point Ritchie. Point Ritchie is in the bottom of Victoria, on the sea there, for a midden, 90,000 years old. This is not a radical idea for me. This is what they got. He announced that 3 years ago. Did anyone hear the announcement? It was a clever announcement, wasn't it? Yeah. Yes, it was very cleverly done. He went out the back of the corner, had one camera there and announced it and ran away, and that was it. It disappeared. What was fascinating was this. He said, yeah, look, my date of 90,000 is right. Now, I want you to think about this. Africans were supposed to get up the top 60,000 years ago, 30,000 years before they got there. And when they got there, being people from the sea, they spread around the coast. That's the story. And it took them 20,000 years to get down to the bottom of Victoria. So I have to add 20,000 on top of 90,000. That gives me 110,000. That's double the date they're supposed to be here. Bowler said, yes, but I need more evidence. I love it when they get one like that. Say, yeah, look, that's interesting, but I need more evidence. And if I had more evidence, I believe in it. Well, you know what Bowler's got? Probably the same problem I've got, isn't it, Evan? Yeah. He probably hasn't any short-term memory cells left, just like me.
You've got 1 or 2.
I've got 4 left, thank you, and I look after them very carefully. But don't feel sorry for me. It was through self-abuse, so don't worry about that too much. But Bowler forgot in 1983, he, along with Gerdip Singh and Peter Owendijk, went up to the Great Barrier Reef and put down a core sample and came back with a date of 186,000 years when people were there doing fire stick farming. And he put his name to that paper. And lo and behold, he forgot about it. Because if he said he wanted more corroborating evidence, he's already done it himself. But the reality was, what he actually said was, I'm not going back to that site. I don't want to talk about it again because it doesn't fit. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what Australian archaeology is called. It doesn't fit. So there we've got Point Ritchie, a big problem because it doesn't fit. So now we know in Australia, the 60,000 years is wrong. Now we know from the white flag, Africa is wrong. So who are we going to look for now? So now we know what we're going to do now, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to look around the world and see what we can find. We're going to find out who was this race that started all this, because somebody did. And I can tell you now, and you'll find out soon enough, there's so much evidence coming in now where the Africans are not part of this game. They really aren't part of it. Next one, please, Evan. Well done. Okay. This picture, I might have shown this before, but we're going to do it differently today. This was taken in 1896 by a gentleman called Hermann Klatsch. He's a German anthropologist, and he came up with a novel idea in the university in Europe. It was called on-field anthropology. So what he decided to do, he invented the idea of going on, because before that, the archaeologists and anthropologists would wait for stuff to be sent to them and then they'd make a comment. They never went out and checked out the people. Klatsch came to Australia from 1904 to 1907 and lived here for 4 years up the top. He is as racist as the day is long, but he's got some amazing stuff we'll put in as we go through there. So we're going to include him. That was his picture. Now what he said was, he said, they look very Aboriginal. I don't have to convince you of that. I'm not going to sit here for half an hour to tell you that. That's pretty straightforward. But what we've now found since then, over to you, Evan, is we've done some genetic study on the Ainu. And Evan's going to read now from some work from Robert Lindsay, who's going to tell you what they found about the Ainu.
This excellent piece on the genetics of the Ainu shows that they are in fact very different from Japanese, Koreans, Okinawans, Chinese, in fact all other East Asians. The best explanation for the Australianoid Ainu are the remains of ancient Northeast Asians before they transitioned to Mongoloids about 9,000 years ago. They are now seen as Australianoids and not as Caucasians.
Okay, so they're now found genetically that the original people, the Ainu, are part Mongoloid and part Australian. Okay, so my question is, how did they get there? Because the original people aren't supposed to sell to other countries, but how did their genes end up there? They are up there. Now what's really interesting, ladies and gentlemen, you know the Asian race, they are later. There was a race before them. The original people were through the whole of Asia. The whole of Asia. Klatsch made a comment, not about the Ainu, because he knew they were Australian. He made a comment about other groups, including the Mongoloid, who he claims are also original. So if we cross between the Ainu and the Mongoloid, they're both original. It comes out the same. If you would please, Evan.
In his estimation, we have not yet sufficient evidence to determine the condition of the Malays and Mongoloids. Nevertheless, despite the void that he felt, it is probable at least that they represent a side branch of the Austral-Caucasians. He felt the prominence of the cheekbones, which begins in the primitive Australian type, along with the proportions of the limbs, were original traits that spread throughout Asia.
Okay, now what we're saying, and this is actually, they've done a lot of genetic work on this, there are remnant original groups through the whole of Asia. The oldest Homo sapiens sapiens skull found in Asia at Perak Cave is original. That's in Malaysia. So what we have, and according to the geneticists, and this is what they're just finding out, around about 40,000 years ago, the Asian race starts to originate in China and starts to make its way down. And that's when you start to get this movement where the original race, which are the original people, start to break up in genetic cul-de-sacs. And that happens in America too, and we'll look at that soon as we go along. So what we're getting here now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take you around the world, then focus on one place. And Evan's still trying to work out where we're going because he only got this sheet about half an hour ago. So we now cross off the Ainu, Evan. I hope you're keeping up because I am. Okay, so the Ainu are gone. So what have we got there? We've got Mongoloid, and we've got Ainu, and we now know that they are actually original genes. So we know they're travelling. We know they're at least in Asia. Now, who is this group? Now, let's do the other part of the equation first. Are we not? Oh, well done, Evan. Okay, next up. You've heard of Adam and Eve, and we've been told that Eve is in Africa. Look, just for the sake of keeping the argument balanced, let's say Eve is in Africa. That Eve, the person who created all of us, was in Africa. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? If she was, it was a long-distance relationship because Adam was never in Africa. So if they did, if she was, he must have travelled to Africa, slept with her and went back because he's not African. We now know that as a fact. I want you to think about that. You can't make a new race with a woman on their own unless it's immaculate conception. I'm not going down that path today. Otherwise, you need a man, and the man is not African. And we now know that for a fact. Okay, Evan, who is this mob? I love you get to say this first. Go on, tell them who it is.
Kleisel and Rahansky.
Right, now what they've done is they've done the largest study of Y chromosomes, which is what we carry, men. It's what they measure from us. Now, Y chromosomes are crappy to measure because they're very erratic and they're very hard to do a lot with, but you can compare them with each other. That's all they're good for. You really can't date with them. Some people say you can. The women's genes are much more reliable. Our genes are a bit more willful. We can't control them as well. Okay, now Evan, could you tell me what the base of this study was, please?
A more plausible interpretation might have been that both current Africans and non-Africans descended separately from a more common ancestor, thus forming a proverbial fork. A region where this downstream common ancestor arose would not necessarily be in Africa. In fact, it was never proven he lived in Africa.
It was never proven. The first paper which I have here says probably in Africa. These people never said definitely, they said probably. It was never proven that anyone was in Africa. It was an assumption. And when the genes to begin with, we didn't understand them well in the 1990s. We do now. We understand them much better. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's the problem. What they then did was they took 400 men who donated their sperm to a greater cause, and it was analysed. And what they then did was those 400 men are what are called non-African. They took them from every race bar African. And then they compared their sperm to African sperm. And what they look for particularly is there are 13 specific haplotypes that only belong to Africans. And they figured, okay, we'll see the connection. So 13 times 400 is 5,200 possible hits. And do you know how many hits they got? None. Not one. There was not one haplotype, not one chromosome in any of those non-Africans that matched the Africans. No, not one. And that is why that map we've got up here has the African group as a separate line. 1, 2, 3. That's it. That's all they've got on their line. All of the line comes from there. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, see that mark there? That is African. 128. That's as far as it goes, according to the Y chromosome. At 180, it has to be another race. Well, guess what? African's gone. You've only got 3 left. European, Asian, and original. It's got to be one of those 3. It can't be African. We know that as a fact. So wherever Adam was, I can tell you now, according to the Y chromosomes, and this, by the way, is called the walkthrough program. It was done with 6 universities. No one's challenged it. No one has written a paper against it. It is given as being scientifically correct. So what we now have is, I don't know where Adam came from, but he doesn't come from Africa. So we're going to look a bit further next. Whoa, what's this?
It's the same thing.
Oh, that's the 13 subclades. Okay, that's basically what I said. And if you want to see there are more. All of these here are not in any of those. It's actually done and dusted, ladies and gentlemen. Africa's out of it. You can't have the guy there. If he's not providing the sperm, you don't get babies. It's that simple. So let's move on. Evan, I don't know what the next one is. Oh, yes, I do. Oh, it's kissing cousins. That's right. Okay, so Dad is not African. Well, we better go and look around for someone else now because it's not there. So let's look around. The Denisovans. If I walk past that Denisovan in the street today, you know what I'd say? G'day. I wouldn't look upon him like Homo erectus or someone bending down like that. I kept looking at the reproductions of the Denisovan. I kept thinking, what's the difference? And I don't believe there is one, and I'll tell you why in a sec anyway. Okay, the Denisovans. If you looked in any book that was written last century, you wouldn't know they existed because we only discovered them 12 years ago. We didn't know they existed. They're now considered to be as prevalent as Neanderthal. How much do we know about our archaeology? They are everywhere. We've found them all over the place.
Russia, Spain, the whole of Eurasia.
Siberia, the whole thing. They're spread through the whole of the continent. Now here's the interesting part of the equation, ladies and gentlemen. We have found Denisovans in Spain that are dated at 500,000 years, and we found Denisovans in Siberia that are dated in 16,000 years. They've been around for a long, long, long time. And you know what's really interesting is there's one race on this planet that has a massive crossover in genes. It has the highest crossover of any hominid on the planet for any humans. The original people have up to 6% of their genes today that is Denisovan. It's not Homo sapiens sapien. Which means over 1/20th of their genetic pattern is not Homo sapien pattern. So would I call them Homo sapiens sapien? I wouldn't. And to add to that point, ladies and gentlemen, my gene pattern, I'm 4.7. I'm nearly 5% non-sapien sapien. All original people have between 4 to 6% Denisovan. Here's my problem. The Denisovans have been around for 500,000 years, and their closest relations are the original people only supposed to be here for 50,000 years. Do the maths. And the best part is they were never in Australia. Now when they found a finger of a Denisovan woman that was 30 to 40,000 years old, and they found 6% mitochondrial DNA, which is exactly the same as the Aboriginals, you know what they said? Oh, well, the Denisovans must have sailed to Australia. They're making up as they go along, because you read the books, they'll tell you only Homo sapiens sapien can sail books to other countries. That's what every book says. So when this happens, they make up a news story and says, oh, well, we've got one group that's Denisovan and one group's Homo sapiens sapien, the original people. So which group sails? The Denisovans, because they don't want the original people to go outside the country, but they did. And I've got to make a point. For me to have 4.7% Denisovan genes today, one of my ancestors was a kissing cousin with the Denisovans. It wasn't shaking hands, it was a lot more than that. They were familiar in every sense, and in the biblical sense too. These two groups, and remember again, the Denisovans have never been to Australia, so how did the genes get out there? I'm starting to get a pattern now, ladies and gentlemen. Someone is wandering around the countryside because Spain, Siberia, up here, we've got Japan. We have original genes in every spot, spreading everywhere, all over the place. Okay, now, we've done that, we've done that. Now the next question is, have I got proof of a boat journey? Because that's what I need here, don't I? I need a boat if they're going to go all around the world. And yes, we do. But it's an unusual boat, isn't it, Evan?
It's quite unusual.
Are you going to show it to them, or are you going to keep it a secret? Oh, there it is. Okay, what's unusual about this boat is that Evan's going to tell you a story now. We're working with a... Well, you tell them the story, please, Evan.
Mayan priestess, and she got in contact with us and said she's worked out that they actually came to Australia from Central America, and described, without even seeing this photo, a boat that looked like that. It was actually a sealed boat. It had a little hole for the cooking fires to go through, and they used the currents to come across. They knew at a certain time of the year they could hop in the boat and just arrive in Australia. I think it was about 3 weeks it took them.
3 or 4 weeks.
And she even said, gave us what they ate along the way. They
Maize.
Special maize cakes that they made that lasted.
And the boat was completely sealed off.
Yep.
There were no sails, no rudder. It was a complete sealed piece. And what would actually happen is it floated. Now, if you'd heard of Thor Heyerdahl, the guy that did the La Balsa story, are you aware of the fact he wasn't trying to prove that the South Americans went to the Pacific Island? He was trying to prove they went to Australia. That's why he sailed to Ballina. Pacific Islands wasn't the proof here. He was working on Paul Revere, who said that the original South Americans sailed to Australia. That's what he was trying to prove. And what he did was he launched 3 weeks late, and he got stuck around Easter Island. If he'd gone at the right time of the year with the currents, he would have got to Australia. And they told us that this boat would get them to Sydney, somewhere near there, didn't they?
Yeah, somewhere around Sydney, Central Coast.
This was taken to Gosford, that same boat. So, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you want other proof, the oldest painting, the oldest engravings of boats in the world with 23 and 29 people, which is dated at 50,000 years, with people sitting in the boats, is found in the Kimberley region. That's the oldest anywhere in the world. 23, 29 people, that's a boat. That's a full boat. They're sitting there, and it's an ocean-going boat. And that's where you'll find the oldest record of boats sailing to oceans. It's in Australia. That, notice also, this is for high waves. It's not for the river, it's not for the lakes, it's for the ocean.
Highbrow.
Highbrow. Next one, please, Evan. And we now know we've got boats, and we've got them all over the place. All right. I'm going to do one more place because we're going around the world. I want to make this a global story because it is. Next part, we're going to go back to what is the reliable genetic part of this story. Ladies, we can date your mitochondrial DNA. Every time there's a variation, we can date it down to 3,500 years. It's really a fantastic genetic marker. The women have got the complete history of humanity inside their genes. Now, what's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, there's 7 too many in India. 2 years ago, Dr. Rao and the Indian government did a mitochondrial survey of the southern part of India, the bush people, not the Andaman Island, who are so Aboriginal it's not funny. You don't even have to worry about them. They are original people. And what they found is people alive today in India that have, and there are 7, of the 926 people they surveyed, 7 have complete original mitochondrial DNA signatures. They're not Indian. They are still, to this day, original people living in India. I'm not saying that those 2 there are the ones they sampled, but they're common pictures. In fact, Duncan Rhodes gave us those pictures, didn't he? Oh, David Jones. Sorry, I get them mixed up sometime. Yeah, that's an original person. If I showed you that to people in Anangu, they'd say that's one of my... In fact, actually, an Anangu person said that's one of my relations. It's not. Well, it is. It is one of their relations, but by distance.
There's a linguistic connection as well.
Yes. If you were to speak Dravidian and speak Tasmanian original, you could actually communicate. They have all exactly the same pronouns, same words for everything, same grammatic structure. It's well known. The Tasmanian language is basically Dravidian, or should I say, the Dravidian language is basically Tasmanian, other way around. So this contact is all over the country. Okay, moving along for our science lesson. I've nearly lost one person, 1/7, moving along. Okay, now you want proper fair income proof. Here it is. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this went around the world and it was in one mainstream TV show, was mentioned once, and I didn't even see it in the Sydney Morning Herald. There is a beautiful conspiracy of silence. If something turns up that doesn't fit, let's not talk about it and it will go away. Works for the ostrich. Okay, 22 tribes. What's this story about? What it is, this has been going on for 5 years. They had about 7 universities. Have you heard of Harvard? That's one of the main people there. David Reich was involved, that wasn't he? The head of Harvard. These are the top universities in the world that got together, and what they wanted to do was to solve the problem. Where did the American people come from? So what they did was this. They went into the Amazonian jungle in here, and they looked for 22 tribes, and they're called the Tupu and the Gi speaking. They are a combination of those 2 tribes, and what's beautiful about these tribes is they have nothing to do with anyone else. They marry within the 22 tribes and they do not marry outside. So the researchers thought, well, this is the place to go because you've got a clean pool that hasn't been tainted. And if we do mitochondrial survey on this, we'll find out where the American people come from. And I've got to tell you, the comment they wrote was, we tried so hard to make this result go away, but every time we did, it got stronger. They don't understand it, it's confusing. And what's confusing is the closest relationship to the Tupu and Gi speaking people is Australia and Papua New Guinea. The people in Argentina, nowhere near it. All around South America, nothing to do with them. They are not related. Why? Because they kept separate and they kept the original gene bank. It was never tainted. And they now, their closest relations are Papua New Guinea. By the way, until 8,000 years ago, Papua New Guinea was part of Australia. It's called Sahul, and Australia. And of course, the other group that is the same, Andaman Islands, of course, because they're original anyway. They are their relations. They are the people they're closest to. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, as all the researchers said, we thought it was one founding population. We're wrong. There were two founding populations in America, and guess who went first? The original people. Their boats are all over the Indo-Pacific region. That's what we're trying to take you through today. Now, what these guys are trying to work out is how this happened. All they will tell you is we don't know whether the Amerindians came first or the original people came first, but one of them did. Well, we do know which one came first, because what they didn't mention is that in South America, Dr. Walter Neves has 55 skulls, doesn't he, Evan? And they're all original. And they're getting dates of 25, 28 and 32,000. Now remember, the Amerindians got there 12 to 15,000 years ago. Any date past that is original. And there are dates in America right now we're getting of 500,000 years, 1.3 million years, and there's one place at Lake Valsequilo where there are 8 dates that go between 250 to 660,000 years. The original people were there a long, long time ago. That's what we're finding there. And how do we know that's true? Because the DNA tells me that. You see, everything I'm telling you now is from the top scientists in the world, and it's floating all around the place, but people don't put it together. So what we now know is they've been to Japan, they've been through Asia, they've been up to Siberia, they've been to Spain, and now we've got them over here in India, and now we've definitely got them in the US. They're the rules. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now what we're going to do is let's do the country we think has the closest link to the original people. That's America. The Amerindian people, the Hopi, the Navajo. They're the people the closest. And let's look at the story there. Now, let's look at this group, the Paraque. Now, this is the beauty of this. Do you realise there were at least, when the Spanish got there, there were 4 different Aboriginal tribes still living in America. 4 when the Spanish got there. We've still got one now, haven't we? We've got the mob in the Amazon. They're still alive. This mob here are quite an interesting group. They're called the Paraque. And according to Sylvia Gonzalez, she's looked at the skulls of all of them, and all the heads are original. And they're Pen-on woman, what's she, 25,000 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, they've got a date of 25,000 years for Pen-on woman now. Now, what Evan's going to read to you now is taken from an earlier book of ours, Constructing a New World Map, and it's basically a coverage of the Spanish record of the Paraque. I want you to listen to the description and then compare it and see if you can find another race that rings to the same story. If you could, please, Evan.
These people are now extinct, but their combined demise was quite recent, and they were still thriving when the Spanish invaded their lands. Their written accounts depicted a nomadic society of seafaring people coping extremely well and showed no signs of stress or oppression from the neighbouring tribes. The Paraque exhibit an aversion towards any activity that necessitated leaving the earth upturned and exposed, and left no trace of agricultural practices. In keeping with the traditions of the dreaming, the hierarchy and the positions of leadership were not discriminated through gender and control. Went mostly to the males, but occasionally positions of leadership were also held by women. Their religious practices appeared to resonate to the precepts ordained by the dreaming. The Paraque religion was basically a shamanistic system, with unique burial rituals requiring the application of liberal servings of red ochre and a method of disposal claimed to create corpses resembling mummies. The men, who normally went naked, hunted with the assistance of woomers to propel their wooden spears, which the Spanish referred to as atalas, spear throwers.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are no Amerindian tribes that hunted with a woomera. Only original people hunt with a woomera. The Paraque hunted with a woomera, and they were naked. That's original. That's original, and they're dark. They're dark. So that group, there was 150 of them, 160, something like that, when the Spanish came. Now, you know what's happening to these groups? Yes, the next group came in, and by the way, some people, our sites, some of our articles have gone up on the Ku Klux Klan, haven't they, Evan?
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise.
Yes, it was a bit of a surprise. You know why? They're using this to say, well, if you Indians wiped out the original people and killed them, what right have you got on the land? Now this is rubbish, because we just read there where the other tribes tolerated them. You're going to find this in each case. They tolerate them. But what you're going to find is the Pericue are right up in the corner here. Now what Sylvia Gonzalez says, when they were sailing, that's what she says, when they were sailing, they got caught in this cul-de-sac here, and that's why they settled there. But it's a cul-de-sac, and all around it are Amerindian people. Where's their genetic change over there? They haven't got one. Let's go to the next group. This group also, what have we got up next, Evan? Is it the Euro? They also, we've got pictures of them. They were still alive in 1900, weren't they?
Yeah.
There were 6 men, but no women. And the men, just like that guy I showed you before, the Ainu, he wouldn't sleep with the women because they were not the same. The same with the 6 men. They were the original race, and all the other women were part Euro, part Amerindian. Now, with that story there, Evan, if you can, you've got 2 to read there, haven't you? And this will tell us something about the Euro. Now, they lived at a place called Lake Titicaca. And do you know what? No one would go near them, because all the other Indian races thought these guys are weird and different. They can walk on water. We won't have a thing to do with them. They kept away from them. In fact, they thought they were disgusting. Evan, if you can, please, this is journal from the Spanish, or it'd be the Spanish, wouldn't it? Spanish again. Yeah.
The Euro claim they descended from the people that built Tiwanaku's civilization. Other Indians believed their blood was black, and they could not drown nor be struck by lightning. The Euro did not consider themselves to be related to others, and did not consider themselves human. Neither did the other Indians concede them that quality.
There's a separation there, ladies and gentlemen. They're not of the same group.
The term Euro, according to the local dialect, means rustic, dirty and stupid. An account of the first contact between the Spanish and the Euro highlights this divide. Their language was described as ugly, guttural and a vulgar tongue, the most difficult to learn in the whole kingdom. This race, which was Doa-Daleptic and much darker than their Bracco-Saleptic neighbours, were regarded with contempt.
Now you know why I get him to read the words out. I couldn't read those 2 words if I tried. It's very obvious. I'm his father, we can do those ones. What that basically means is they're incredibly black. That's what it meant. They had a different physique than the rest of them. So the Euro are black, dirty, vulgar, and they claim they don't belong to the Indian people. The Pericue claim they have nothing to do with these people. Can you see that pattern's repeating itself? They are original people. But notice again, we've got Lake Titicaca, which is a long way from where the Pericue were. What we've got is remnant races in different parts of America that have been wiped out at different times. And I think we go on to, in fact, we're nearly finished the science lesson, ladies and gentlemen. We're about to get on to some pictures in a second. Let's put the Euro done. They've done. We've got the Pericue about 200 years ago. We have the Euro 100 years ago. And of course we have Terra del Fuego down the bottom there. This was taken by Clatch again. Now, are you aware of the fact that in 1578, Francis Drake, you might have heard of him, he went down there. He went down there to look at the Patagonian giants. You see, these people here, they don't believe they belong to the rest of the Americans, just like the others. And they stand over 7 foot. Everyone went down to in England. They thought this was amazing. It was famous. They're everywhere. Let's go and see the Patagonian giants, because they're not like the rest. And I think has our friend Mr. Clatch got something to say about them too?
He's got something racist to say.
Oh, of course he's got something racist to say about them.
The question is still full of puzzles, especially as regards to the Yalgans of Terra del Fuego. Those very primitive physical and cultural features remind us of the lowest races of the old world.
The lowest race of the old world are the original people. I have to tell you this, Clatch decided that the original people were the beginning, but the original people stagnated in their ignorance and we all got better. So they're the rubbish that we begin with. I've got to tell you, Clatch is great to work with because he's not a crusader for original rights, but he's a scientist, and if you work through the racism, you get some great information. It's just sometimes the racism is horrific.
It's pretty bad.
You can get one sentence with 4 racist comments in it and you think, oh God, how can you put it all together? It's nearly impossible. 7 foot high, that's typical of Asian people? Not. Never. Never typical of Asian people have, oh, race 7 foot, 7'6". They are another group of the original people with the broad noses and the wide faces, which is what the original people have.
You can still see, there's a documentary that came out, I think, in the late 90s, and they interviewed, I think it was 2 or 3 sisters.
Yeah.
Terra del Fuego, and they were the last of that population.
Yeah.
And I think they were in their 90s, so I think they've since passed, but yeah, they're still around that recent.
And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? They were part of that. So ladies, what we've tried to do now is just very quickly take you a bit of a whiz around the world, particularly the Indian Pacific Basin, to prove to you the original people have been everywhere. They were the first race. They were the very first race. Now what we're going to do now is let's get specific and come back to one country, Australia. Let's look very quickly. I'm going to dismiss this thing one more way. We're going to look at this story about the Africans coming here 50 to 60,000 years ago. That's the theory, the out of Africa theory, and they got here 50,000 years ago and got down to Victoria about 30,000 years ago. Well, that's a load of rubbish. There are at least at the moment 10 dates that are over 60,000 years in Australia. 10 different dates. And all of them were given by, not by us, by scientists. Sometimes they've been challenged, some haven't been. We just don't talk about them. Okay, next one please, Evan. Now we're going to talk about the Australian story. And there's an interesting part to that story, which is this particular gentleman here. And then we're going to get onto our sites. What's interesting about this person, he is agreed by everyone, whether it's Alan Thorne, Jim Bowler, I don't care who is the oldest original person on the planet. Oldest. In fact, it's the oldest complete Homo sapien found anywhere in the world. It's 60,000 years old. And if you look very carefully, you'll notice that the front two teeth have been taken out. Initiation, religion, 60,000 years ago. You can see a darker colour there. That's red ochre, just like the parakeet. Same way. Notice the two hands are placed there grasping the penis. When the Whitefellas got there in 1790, 1810, they buried them the same way then. That burial technique has been going on for 60,000 years untouched. That's a religion, ladies and gentlemen. But here's the interesting part of the story. We got the bone. We got a little finger bone and we took out some mitochondrial DNA. Now this is so important. When it came out, it was on the front page of every newspaper for one day, then we didn't discuss it anymore. The reason is because the mitochondrial DNA we found there, you cannot relate to any other race on the planet. Those genes that this person have, we don't recognise. But I can tell you one thing, there is not one African marker amongst the gene pattern of this person. Now, he's either 50 to 70,000 years old, and if they did get off the boat, he was one of the first ones to get off. He is supposed to be reeking in African genes and Y chromosomes. He's got nothing. He's got nothing. What the experts said, because they had to have a reason for this, they said, oh, he is a mutation that came out of Africa and lay dormant for 20,000 years, popped up in one generation. Oh, geez, fair income. I thought they could have come up with something better than that, but that's the best one they come up with. And the interesting part is, if he is a mutation, if he is one, why was he buried with such dignity? Why'd they spend so much time on someone who's a mutation that may have been sterile? Gee, that'd help the family, wouldn't it? And the tribe. No contribution whatsoever, so we treat him like a god. It doesn't make sense, ladies and gentlemen. It's rubbish. He is part of a story that goes way back to the beginning. Now, if you want to believe that he was on that boat, then would you please build a bigger boat? Because it's not enough to include him. You've got to include all the other original people that are fair income original people. What about the little fellas? There's not one elder in this country that won't talk about them, will they?
Love the little fellas.
Oh, they love them. Because they're their teachers and their advisors. They're the wise ones. That is a picture of a race of not dwarfs or pygmies, but little people. He's the boss. That's Joseph Birdsville, 5'10" he is. He was the tallest of their tribe. That was taken in 1938. 2 months after that was taken, the elder told Joseph Birdsville, we've had enough of the white man's ways. We're going off into the bush and you'll never see us again. That's up in the back near Kurunda, near Cairns. You go up in the rainforest there and try and find them, but you won't find them because we read stories about them. They are the masters of camouflage. They say you could walk past them and they could take the guise of a tree and you wouldn't see them.
There are whispers that they're still there.
There are whispers they're still there, but they don't want to be with us right now. Some of the elders will tell us, oh yes, we've met them. And if you don't believe that, let me tell you something. Go and look up the height distribution for the smallest high school, primary school in Australia. It's at Kurunda. Their genes are still around. They have the smallest primary school kids in Australia, in Kurunda, right next to where they were. They're still around. They're still around. They're still there. But if you're going to put this mob on the boat, because they go back a long time, you've also got to put the next one on the boat, because he's not like the gracile one. This one here is called robust. He is, at Lake Mungo, WLH 50, is dated at 50,000 years. They were supposed to be on the boat then, so he must have got on the boat too. But I've got to tell you something. If he was in this room right now and sit next to the Denisovan, we talked to the Denisovan, but we'd have some issues with this bloke. His forehead floats back like that. Temple bone. Yours is 3 mil. His is 18 mils thick. Torus goes all the way across. Bone of the jaw is 50% bigger. This bone here is 50% wider. You hit him in the head with your hand and you'll break your hand and he'll just smile at you. And here's the interesting part. Brain capacity, 1540 cc. You and I, 1300 cc. He's not an idiot. We've got 81% of the brain capacity of what he's got. This guy was alive from 50,000 years to 6,000 years. We've got him all over the place. And you know what's interesting? We went to Cow Swamp where there are 82 buried robust men. No grassholes, just robust. They kept separate. So how did they get on the boat? Well, we've got a boat. If they came to Australia, I've got the grassholes from Lake Mungo. I need 20. You need 20 to start a population without inbreeding. But I need 20 little people. Then I need 20 of this mob. I now have a boat that's got to take no less than 60 people. And it was sailing around here 60,000 years ago? No, didn't happen. They were already here. These are all variations from way back. Now, we're now going to go to the last part of the story, which is the admission of error. And what that is, ladies and gentlemen, is that the people who wrote the paper that said it's out of Africa, that's Alan Wilson and Rebecca Cann, both recanted within 10 years. And both of them said, we got it wrong, it was Australia. Both of them. That's the paper the whole Out of Africa story comes out of. Cann and Wilson both said, no, it's Australia. And what they both did was said this. Cann found this, and this is very important. Cann said she studied 126 vials of blood from 26 tribes and 10 vials of blood from the Australian Aboriginal people. That's not many, but that's okay, we'll get there. And what she found was the original people started at least 400,000 years ago from, and here's where it gets interesting, 2 lineages. 2. Now this is where we're going to start to walk away from mainstream science. Now I know one of the images, one of the 2 lineages is hominid. The second one, we might have to look somewhere else for that. We'll get to that later. Wilson was the main person who wrote this paper, and he was the founding professor who's now died. He came to Australia when he found out what Cann did, and he sampled 31 vials of full descent blood. And you know what he found? He found a mutation rate. He found that there were 22 different strands of blood amongst 31 women, which means it was a 70% mutation rate. Africans have 4%, Europeans 5%, Asians about 7%. We've got 70% here, which means we've got the largest mutation rate of any race on the planet, which means the original people are the oldest. That's given. That is what both these 2 have both said. They both said this is wrong. So ladies and gentlemen, let's finish our science lesson, because we could actually do this for the next 3 hours, couldn't we?
One more quote left.
Oh, have we?
It's
What?
a summary quote.
Whose is it?
It's on the back cover.
Oh, jeez.
He always leaves-
As I said before, we're doing this as we're making this up for the first time. We changed the whole thing. If there are any mistakes made, it's his fault.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
That's why we have children, by the way. When you get older, you realise this. We keep children so first so we can blame them when we make mistakes, and we forget things. He can tell us where I'm up to. So, okay, this is a quote that sums up basically what you've told it. And of course, we always finish, and I would have remembered, instead of embarrassing me like that, I would have remembered to finish with that. We always finish by asking the elders, what have they got to say? And this quote tells us what the elders say about how they came about.
They say we've been here for 60,000 years, but it is much longer. We've been here since the time before time began. We have come directly out of the dream time of the great creative ancestors. We have lived and kept the earth as it was on the first day. All other peoples of the world come from us.
One thing I want to tell you with the great creative ancestors, can I remind you, the great creative ancestors are never called gods. They're called sky heroes in this country. Do not call them gods, because that's a word you brought in from somewhere else. They are called sky heroes. They come from the sky. We'll talk more about this as we go along, because that part of the equation I'm sure you're quite interested in. Oh my God, we finished, have we? Right. Science is out. We've done lesson 1, thank God for that. And everyone managed to stay awake for most of the time, which is brilliant. And don't worry, if you do fall asleep, I will certainly not point that out because I am always the one who falls asleep first. So I just walk around you gently and not wake you up. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to work with some of the stuff we've been doing. I'm going to present to you a site that, yes, we have got the top laboratory in probably New South Wales on side with. They've looked at this, the scientists have looked at this, they saw it yesterday, and this is straight from the laboratory to you, and they cannot understand what this object is. They have agreed they're going to close the lab down for next Friday. They're going to put everyone on this particular object to try and find out what it is, and regardless of what mainstream thinks, they're going to put the papers out anyway. So this may actually end up getting into mainstream for the first time because we've got a university and the top laboratory in probably the country on side with us. So let's have a look at this particular unusual relic. Here it is here. It was found 1 metre beneath the surface at a place up our way which contests with Tully for the highest rainfall in Australia. On any given year, they might get about 180 to 200 inches. This was found 1 metre beneath the surface, and by our figuring, it's been there for thousands of years, but it's not rusted. It's not corroded. There is no form of erosion or corrosion or anything on this particular thing. We don't know what it's called. If you have a look at this now, what's really interesting is you could put this in a dark room and it would continue shining. And by the way, that's what the scientists are blown away by. They cannot understand why it's got this sheen or luster all over it. It really, you could turn the lights out and it would still have a light, wouldn't it? Yeah. It's the most amazing artefact I've ever seen. Now, what's really interesting about it is this. We think it could be. Well, we don't know. If it's a horse, I've got some problems because we've got people from around the world who've been to all the museums and all the places they can. Nobody's found something close to it. There's no tail. There are no ears. And when you get to the ears, there's a latch that goes across. Can you turn to the back of it, please, Evan? We turn it, oh. Right, as you sort of lean this way a bit as you take it in, what you start to see, can you see that bit of blue there? The bit of blue there? We know there's copper in there. Now, when's the Copper Age? It's going back 2,000 years. I can tell you what we know is not there. There's no iron ore. You see, you can date, and we're going to find the impurities because we've got this particular thing that costs $1.5 million they're going to use next Friday. We can find the impurities and find out where it came from. But what's really interesting in this story, ladies and gentlemen, is there's a bit of blue there, which is an accumulation or concentration of copper in that area. But as the scientists, when they grabbed this, they pulled it. And they pulled it around and said, this is far, far too strong to be copper. There are other things in there. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Can you go back to the picture before, please, Evan? What we're interested in is not so much that effect, but the mottling. Can you see how the colour's mottled? Now, here's where it gets interesting. We've done some research, and recently, from the 1960s onward, they put something into brass and copper. It's called molybdenum. It's only used for the most sophisticated machinery, for energy generation. Now, what it does is, it will give a sheen to the metal that's given and gives mottled effect with the colouring. Now, there's only 2 things that can do that. Now, the interesting part is, ladies and gentlemen, that was found in the 1960s. We think it's in there. And we know that this is thousands of years old. The question is this. We've got it down to 3 possibilities. And by the way, this is as far as we can go. It could be a Celtic horse. It could be about 2,000 years old. That's one possibility. I don't think it is that. Others claim it could be a pre-Incan one, don't they?
Like a llama.
A llama. Yeah. We have another group that claims it's a giraffe. But has anyone ever seen them ride a giraffe? I don't know what the skills are in it.
Could be fun.
Oh, yeah, right. But everyone's guessing. Everyone's guessing. But I'm going to throw something in there, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think it's any of them. And I'm going to tell you what I think it is, and I'm not sure if it's right, but we'll find out as we go along. Firstly, when you put molybdenum in there, you make this a superconductor. Do you realise after silver, which is 100% conductor of electricity, next one up is copper. You put molybdenum in there, it works better than silver. Why would I be using a refined metal that makes it a superconductor if it's a statue? Is it a statue? Is it something else again? Remember up the top there's no ears, but there's actually a latch where you can put a latch that puts the two bits together.
How big is it, Steve?
Yeah.
How big is it?
Oh, it's about this big. About 10 centimetres, okay? I was hoping to bring it today to show you. Oh, geez, you couldn't pry that off him. In fact, the professor said we'll put it in the safe. Yes, mate?
Yeah, I think the pronunciation is molybdenum.
Sorry?
Molybdenum.
Think it could be that?
It's got an unusual spelling, if you're interested.
Yeah, I'll look for it.
M-O-L-Y-B-D-U-N.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, that was me trying to say it. That was my interpretation of it. That's the one we're looking at. Yeah, you're right.
M-O.
M-O. Yeah. I know it. Yeah, I know what it is. It's the same one, but I didn't pronounce it properly. That's the one we're looking at, because if it is, what it does is it means this. It can't be an earlier culture because they never used the metal. And then we have to look elsewhere. My take is this. I don't believe it's from an earlier civilization. I do not believe it for a second. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you a story that's slightly out of sync. Quite recently, we were working with ancient aliens on 3 sites, and we're going to do one in a sec. It was at the Karyong site there, and we went out to a place called Bulgandri. And there are carvings there of Bulgandri and his rocket ship when he came through the Milky Way. And that's what Gavi was saying at the time. Then he said something that shocked me. He said, see those 4 kangaroos around the rocket ship? And I thought, yeah, okay, we can see them. And they were filming this at the time. He said, the Pleiadians brought them. They brought them here. These animals don't belong here. They were brought here. Hey, they can bring their genes here. Why can't they bring their pets with them? There's no reason why they can't. Some people say the Syrians brought lions. Well, that's what Gavi said. And then that makes me think, if they brought them there, is this an animal from here or an animal from somewhere else? We don't know yet. I'm inclined to think at the moment, if it's a superconductor, this is not a statue, but it's some form of, it's some battery or something like that, and this has not come from the Earth. But we'll wait and see. And that's why the people in Southern Cross Uni have got so excited, because they've looked at this and they've held it and they said, this doesn't make any sense. We don't understand what's in this metal. I would have loved to have had the report today, but I'll have it next week. And what I will do is I'll send it to you, Mariana.
I'll send it out.
You can send it out. So you will get the scientific report. They've agreed that everything we put will put up publicly, and I'll send it to you first when we get it. So I do apologise for not bringing it now, but you can read about it. And we'll have it done next Friday when we go through this. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, see that piece of... We didn't get a full picture of it. It's about this big. And it goes all the way along there. It's got a blade like that. It was found alongside there. Now, the reason I've put that picture in is very simply because of this. Hunter-gatherers do not carry blades this big that weigh 5 kilos. You don't do that. If you are farming and you were digging things up, yes. But that's the largest axe head in Australia. It's way too big. It is actually this big. And it was found right next to that other thing. And I'm thinking, oh, there's something going on here that doesn't make sense. So, ladies and gentlemen, keep your eyes on that. Artefact with an I. That's American spelling, Evan. Sorry, I couldn't help that.
Spell check.
Spell check, yes. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, keep an eye on that one. We think that might be the first one that's going to get into mainstream, because we've now got probably the second, if not the second top laboratory in the country backing this, and they're using machinery together. Well, I think it cost about $2 million, and it's all ready to go next Friday.